All right, here we go, everyone. Welcome to Dear Dr. Fantasy. And for my guest today, I have the author, Thiago Abdalla. Now, I'm saying your name right this time, right? Am I Thiago?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
All right,
Yeah.
good. I know. So it's Brazilian Portuguese where you say Thiago, right?
Yeah. 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 I
Okay.
mean, normally you'll see people saying Tiago, and I mean, anyway, it's fine for me.
As long as
I
it's not
studied.
Thiago, right? I mean, that
Yeah,
probably,
but
yeah.
I grew up with people calling me Thiago because I studied at a British school,
Oh,
and teachers didn't really know how to pronounce my name either.
okay.
So yeah, I'm just I really really don't mind.
Uh-huh.
Because I know it's not like intuitive in every language, but yeah, it's fine. But
Yeah.
my mother
So
my mother calls me Thiago, so
Thiago, yeah.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
that's what I'm going to say from now on. And although now, correct me if I'm wrong, but in Portugal they do say Tiago, right? Is that
Yeah,
correct?
it's a different accent, and even in some parts of Brazil, it's like Tiago, more like a D.
Oh, huh.
So
Okay.
yeah, like I think in Portugal it would be more like a some people might pronounce it as a little bit of a ch, but maybe not as much as Brazilian Portuguese. But
Okay.
Tiago is probably, yeah, closer
Cool.
to
I
what
love
some people.
starting this out with some linguistics. This is awesome.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And
So,
the th sound is actually the bane of Brazilians speaking English, because
oh yes, I'm sure. Yeah.
they don't know how to do the Thiago.
Yeah.
So when we say stuff like three, it sounds like tree, because the T
Right.
sound, Brazilians say tree instead of three.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. Yeah.
because we don't pronounce the H, right, like a lot of languages. But
Huh.
um
It's
yeah,
actually a
yeah,
fairly rare sound. There are a lot of places where they don't have that th sound.
yeah,
So it tends to get when people from those places are learning English, it often becomes a RT or something else. So yeah,
yeah,
not the
yeah,
most common sound in the world, that th sound. Yeah.
yeah. But
Yeah.
it's not the hardest either. I think the hardest for like non-English speakers, the probably the hardest word that I saw my mother struggle through like all my childhood when she was trying to teach me English, because she's not a native English speaker, and like
Yeah.
teachers were like, you need to speak English at home, so that your sons get used to it, was world. Like
World.
she just had to say word,
Uh-huh.
like she could not like roll her tongue to say world.
Yeah.
It's a hard sound for us.
Yeah. Ha. Ha.
Yeah.
World as in the place where we all live, but also
Yes, yes, yes.
world as in whirling around.
Yeah, that as well. Yeah.
So, well, cool. Yeah. I mean, it fascinates me because I have lived in different places and learned different languages before. And I'm very aware that as an English native speaker, I cannot hear certain sounds in other languages too. And I realize that
Yeah, yeah.
sometimes I sound a little funny because of that. I was actually, I'll tell you a little story about that. Why not? People might find this amusing. So I was learning Nepali when I was living over in Nepal,
Cool.
and they have certain sounds that I just cannot, I can't
Mhm.
make
Yeah,
consciously anyway. I might
yeah.
stumble on them once in a while, but I was reading my Nepali book, and I was studying and trying to get better. And my friend asked me, "What are you doing?" And in Nepali, he's Nepali, and he was trying to help me out. And he said, "So what are you doing? Ke gareko?" And I thought I said, "I'm reading," which would be more, let's see if I get this right now. More particle, more particle. But
Hmm.
I didn't say particle. There's this nasalized A
Yeah,
in there. I didn't
yeah.
say that. I said more particle, which
Oh,
in
right.
Nepali actually means I'm farting. So, so he just started laughing at me. He's like, "What did I say?" You
It's
know?
like, yeah, I mean, if you told me that, I'd say, yeah, fair enough. I just maybe take a
Yeah.
step back. Yeah.
Yeah. Yep. So,
Yeah. Yeah.
so it happens all over. If you're learning a new language, you have to be fearless. You have to be okay with embarrassing yourself
Yeah.
sometimes, I
Yeah.
think. So,
Yeah, of course.
but yeah, so I haven't really properly introduced you yet.
Sorry. Yeah. We
Yeah,
just started like talking.
yeah, no, that's all good. This is Dear Dr. Fantasy, where we just do that. But
Yeah.
I do want to mention that you are the author. I said you're an author, but you are the author of the Ashes of, now, how do you say Avarin or Avarin?
Avarin.
Avarin. Okay, the
Yeah.
Ashes of Avarin series. First book, A Touch of Light, which I have reviewed for my channel and loved. So yeah, great stuff. And also your second book in the series is out,
Yeah.
Shade of Madness. And
You asked me if I had a copy, right? I just remembered I have
fantastic
an
cover.
iPad where I can show the
Oh,
the
cool.
cover.
Yeah, because it has a griffin on the cover, which is automatically cool.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, I'll find it and pull it up, because living in Brazil, stuff takes a little while to get here.
okay.
As good as the printer is, they don't have a printing facility in Brazil, so yeah,
It takes a
like
little longer. Yeah.
couple
So,
of
but I
months.
have noticed that the reviews are great so far. I did watch
Yeah.
Alan's review of A Shade of Madness. He seemed very enthusiastic. So that's
Yeah.
all good.
And
And
like
of course, you do have a sort of prequel novella as well. And
I do
aware of
that
too.
one has arrived, because that one was launched last year. So yeah,
Nice.
a Prelude to Ashes. Yeah.
Sweet. Okay.
Not everyone knows this exists, because it's free on my email for newsletter subscribers. So you can actually get this for free, the ebook version. But I also do have, the now also jacketed, naked hardcovers, just like A Touch of Light. So yeah.
Cool.
So yeah, here it is. If people haven't seen Shade of Madness.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Nice. I mean, it's not perfect because it's the screen,
Yeah.
but you get a sense for just how cool that cover is.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Cool. So you must be very excited to have book 2 out.
I am. The most exciting thing about it as an author, when you're looking at reviews, is seeing people say they liked it more than the first, because it shows you're in a a good
trajectory.
trend.
Yeah.
So
Nice.
that's probably the single thing that makes me most proud of as an author. It's like, yes, I managed to get better.
Oh, absolutely. I concur. It's the craft is something you work at, and if you are hopefully working hard at it, you are getting better. So that's wonderful.
Yeah.
And you had a great start. So yeah. Did you do a lot of writing before Touch of Light? Was that something that you just sort of said, okay, I have to get good at this, so let me practice? And did you produce lots of books that we don't know about that are in your drawer somewhere, or did you just start with A Touch of Light?
I didn't.
Yeah.
I had the idea that I wanted to write like maybe around my 20s, because I've seen a lot of Dear Dr. Fantasy. So I'm gonna like maybe jump the gun on the question of, started reading at an age, stopped, then came back.
Yeah.
I'm very much in those like 90% that always answer yes to that question. So yeah, I stopped reading for a long while, and then I came back to it in my 20s. And when I came back to it, it kind of sparked the idea that I was, maybe interested in writing something someday.
Yeah.
But it took like 10 to 15 years to really, mature into the idea of I'm going to pull the trigger. But weirdly, I didn't, write anything in that span. I just read and kind of carried on with life. And then when my wife got pregnant, 2019, I decided, maybe of all times to pull the trigger, when your wife is pregnant and you're about to have a baby. I decided, let's do it. Let's do it.
Because we don't have enough change in our life right now. I'm going to become an author.
Yeah. But it's funny, because what sparked that was that I wanted to start something that would eventually get big enough so that I could have more time with my kids. And not because I work a corporate job, I work at a bank, like the in Brazil it's 9 to 6, but the usual like 9 to 5 hours. And but it's never, you never get out at 6, at least not here. I'd like get home like 9 p.m. or something.
Oh, wow.
Usually, yeah, because I live in like New York, but Brazil.
Yeah.
So I live in Sao Paulo, which is like the Brazilian New York. So,
Yeah.
it's like 1 hour commute and traffic and all of that, and working late hours. So I didn't want to be one of those parents who just got home and to put my kids to bed, and not
Yeah.
have time for them.
Yeah.
So, and I wanted to be those parents that if my kid walks into the room and says, I have a school play, I want you to be there, I wanted to be able to just say yes and not nothing else, just no questions asked, just yes, I will be there. So that's what sparked my kind of, I'd seen interviews by Evan Winter saying, you can make a living out of self-publishing, and
Yeah.
um it's a viable path. And I didn't go into it thinking I'm gonna be a millionaire or whatever, because you're just setting yourself up for disappointment, whatever you do, if you start anything like that. But
True.
making a living out of it sounds pretty viable and fair. So yeah, even if I was gonna have a kid, I said, okay, let's start this now. And that's when I started just reading craft books. So
Nice.
um
Yeah.
yeah, I said, okay, so if I'm gonna do this, I'm not just gonna wing it, I'm gonna like actually study what I have to study.
That's
And I
good.
treated
Yeah.
it,
Yeah. You got to read about the craft. I think that's
yeah,
really helpful. Yeah.
yeah, I treated it like college. So I read like, I kind of separated it into like disciplines, and
Okay.
as if I was going to class in each of like dialogue, character, pacing,
Yeah.
plot, blah blah blah.
Were there any
And
books that
just,
you found really helpful when you were reading up on writing?
yeah, I read like close to 40 books probably, but I have like a
Wow.
top 3 or 5 that I really like.
Yeah.
Um, the first one, which I always recommend, if people want to jump in and just get a feel for it, is Story Genius by Lisa Cron.
Mm-hmm.
I really love that book because she starts talking about, why we tell stories, which is super interesting, which is,
Cool.
you need to know if that striped kitty that's pretty big is actually dangerous or not, or if the neighboring tribe died of something else that ripped them apart, or if it was that tiger. So we
Mm.
used to tell stories as a survival mechanism, because if you've never seen a tiger, you don't know if it's aggressive, right?
Yeah.
Um so so yeah, there's all that, and she explains, why story is hardwired into your brain, and kind of like what you need to do nowadays to kind of hit that spot and keep people turning the page, keep people engaged in your story.
Yeah.
She calls
Yeah.
it the third rail, like the subway third rail, right? So you can have, amazing plot, battles, whatever. If you don't have the third rail, you don't have power, so you're not going to move forward, right?
Yeah.
So
Cool. Cool.
yeah,
What
I
does she
love that
mean? What
one.
is the third rail? Can you explain that a little bit? Or
It's basically the heart of what the story
okay.
means to the character. So
Yeah.
if you were to say it in a word, it's basically what it means. Not in a word, it's characters, but it's not just the characters. It's what it means to the characters. Why
Yeah.
is what's happening important? Because the characters are your vehicle through the story, basically, right?
Yeah.
They're what the reader latches onto. So,
Yeah.
um, if what's happening doesn't mean anything deeply to the characters, like in their arcs, and for them to evolve and change, then the story means nothing. So,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
the way that every author finds this meaning is what's super interesting to me. I was talking about
Mhm.
this yesterday or the day before with Kay. I think it was the day before. Kay's Hidden
Uh-huh.
Shelf. We had like
It's hidden shelf.
uh
Yeah.
yeah, we had a self-publishing kind of chat. There's Andrew Meredith, who's another self-published author,
I know
Tori,
Andrew. Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, Tori, who's writing an adult epic fantasy now,
Yes.
and
And she has
myself.
written young adult fantasy before, I
Yeah,
think. Dory
yeah,
has. Yeah.
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 She published like a very long while ago, so she has like experience.
Yeah.
But it's her first like epic fantasy. So we kind of like created this writer group that we keep
Cool.
talking, writing in, and Kay was just like, you guys want to hop on and discuss all this stuff. So it's
Yeah.
actually really fresh because I was talking about it like 2 days ago, but the way that each one of us like starts our stories and finds our way into what we want to talk about is really interesting, and it
Yeah.
gives this meaning to the story. So for me, it's theme, weirdly.
Yeah.
And it's not something that, a person starts with usually, I guess. I think people normally go to plot or character or whatever, but
True.
to
Some
me,
writers do, though. Like Steven Erikson has told me he starts with theme.
oh, awesome.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
So some
yeah,
writers definitely do start with theme, and it's obvious to me in A Touch of Light that you were grappling with mortality, for example, in a big way.
exactly,
Yeah,
exactly. Yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
So yeah, I can see what you're talking about there. Yeah,
Cool, cool. Yeah. So I mean, I'm an absolute like nerd in this topic because
yeah.
I started reading craft books and going into it, and I feel like I haven't even scratched the surface. So I get really excited when someone like asks me on Twitter about writing. Someone like I don't know asks me about writing. I'll like, it's a lot to say in the tweet, so I'll just try and tweet one tweet back, and then before I know it, I've tweeted like a chain of like 10 tweets because I keep going to the next thing and then saying the next thing. So
Yeah.
it's just it's really cool to talk about.
Oh, it sure is. I love
Yeah,
talking about it, and we're going to talk about it some more. But we sort of put the cart before the horse, and
yeah, yeah.
before you became a writer, you must have done a fair bit of reading. So we'll
Yeah.
go back to that question, going on the premise that you are what you read. Thiago,
Yeah,
what have
yeah.
been some of the important formative reads that would explain not only who you are, but what brought you eventually to write something like this?
Mhm.
So I would be fascinated to hear about your reading journey, if you don't mind talking about some of the highlights, some of the books that had a big impact on you.
Definitely. So I think the first one that I really, really remember like diving into for myself, that no one actually, gave me the book or said you have to read this, was The Hobbit.
Uh-huh.
It's cliche, I know, but
No,
I
it's
guess
a good cliche, or
yeah,
we can call it a trope, you know.
yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, it's probably like every like 80s, 90s kid is had to have, read The Hobbit at some point. So
I would think so. I mean, I was kind of more a 70s kid, even when it was,
yeah,
yeah, yeah.
yeah. I was born in 88. So yeah, I
Oh,
was
yeah,
very much like a 90s kid, and it was still
yeah,
like, the first thing anyone read basically.
yeah.
So I really, really liked it. And then I just jumped into the Lord of the Rings, and you know, I remember reading the Golden Compass as well, and
Oh,
that's
yeah, that's
that's
good
one.
stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. If you ask me about the story, the only thing I remember is that it has a bear, probably, but I have
Yeah, there are
to go read it.
polar bears
Yeah,
in there, yeah.
yeah, yeah, because I really don't remember. But
But all the
um,
characters have their familiars, or they're called
yeah,
demons in there and that sort of
yeah,
thing. Yeah.
yeah. I remember really, really liking it, and I think I even have a copy of The Subtle Knife here, like the mass market paperback that I still keep for like to remind myself that these were like the first books that I ever like read as a kid. And then you jump into Harry Potter after that, and
Oh,
and
yes.
Harry
Okay.
Potter
Yeah.
was a very big one. um and I actually was really I always was like a big pillar of my life was Magic the Gathering,
Okay.
um,
Okay. Yeah.
which actually has a lot of flavor text on the cards. And they used to have like these stories that they put on their website. Some they have books as well. I read a lot of like Magic the Gathering books at the time,
Can you
which were
actually
just like
explain what that is to me? Because it's funny. I don't even know. It's a role playing thing, or
it's a card game.
okay,
It's a card game. Uh, it's like a very very old card game.
okay.
Um,
Not as old as I
the-
am.
which interestingly is also owned by Wizards of the Coast, who are the owners of Dungeons
They're a
and
publishing
Dragons.
house, I think, right?
Now, Wizards of the Coast is the company that owns Dungeons and Dragons. It's more of a
Oh,
gaming company. Yeah,
okay,
and Magic the Gathering. So they're like they own like the two biggest IPs, I guess, in
okay,
fantasy gaming. And
okay.
Magic is like huge, huge, huge.
Yeah, I
And it
just have
can
a
be
vague idea what it is, because I think I'm a little bit older, so I missed that one.
yeah.
But it sounds like it's like the kind of a D&D type Like in terms
Yeah,
of its
yeah,
impact on the people who participate in it, it's been a big formative thing for a lot of people, right?
it has, and it's, I mean, it's still a very big part of like every the way I see fantasy, I guess.
Cool.
Because you know, it's like a game where you duel another person and you have like the 7 card hand that you start with, and then you can have spells or creatures, and then you like use your mana to cast your creatures, and then the creature has to attack the opponent, or you can use
Ah,
like counter spells, or like just lightning bolt their face or their creatures. And it's just like it's a fantasy battle in card form, and it's awesome.
okay. So it's not
But
like
it
a long-term campaign or something like that.
no, 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 it's just like
Okay. Just
short competitive
these brief
games.
encounters.
Yeah, yeah,
Okay.
yeah, yeah.
Okay.
It's like dual format, like dueling, like, you know, Yu-Gi-Oh or Pokemon or whatever. Um, you
Okay.
know, eventually started to explore this space as well. But Magic was like the it's like the Tolkien of card games, I guess. It's
All right. Cool.
it all started there. And so, you know, Magic was really, really big for me. So I was always like, even if, you know, I eventually kind of hit that spot in life where I wasn't reading that much, but I was always like into Magic, and I had Magic at the back of my mind. So even if I
Wow.
wasn't like reading books, I was still reading like the stories that they have, like short stories that they publish like every day of the week or something
Oh, okay.
on their
Okay.
website. So I was always reading those, and I was always really into that. And I think I kind of lived out stories in different ways as well, you know, and this is something that I find really, really interesting. Um, and I think it's the reason that I actually decided to write, and it was what gave me the spark to kind of like think, oh, okay, so I think this is why I want to write a book, because I was always drawn to stories in whatever I did. So when I was
Ah,
playing like Diablo, you know, the computer game, Diablo
ah,
2 was like the all the rage, and I still love it so much in my childhood. But when I wanted to play the game to see what was going to happen in the story, more than, you know, just grinding to get loot, or the mechanics or battle or whatever, I wanted to to know what was going to happen in the story. I wanted to get the next cinematic. The same thing with Warcraft. You know, World of Warcraft is huge today, but you
yeah.
know, Warcraft 3 was like the thing for me when I was a kid and a teenager. And you know, I think I kept living out, you know, the stories through these other mediums, even if I wasn't reading.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. There's some great storytelling in video games.
yeah.
Not that I know from firsthand experience, but I've been educated on this matter by a former student of mine who explained to me how storytelling works in video games. And so I have some respect for that. Yeah. And I totally agree with you that it is a very engaging form of storytelling and
Yeah.
interactive as well. So it has advantages over just reading from a book in a way, because you're kind of
Yeah.
talk about immersive. I mean, you're actually interacting in that world in a way, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And it's almost like reading a story in second person. That's always done really well, and
Yeah.
isn't like jarring as usually, you know, second person is the dangerous
It's
kind
really
of
tough to pull
POV.
off. I wouldn't
Yeah.
try it myself.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean,
Don't try
unless your
this at home,
name's,
folks. Yeah.
yeah, unless your name's NK Jemison, like
Yeah.
don't try
Unless
it.
you're in K. Jemisin. Yeah.
Yeah. So um you know, I think video games are kind of like, it's almost like the standard in video games is second person, because you are the character and you're controlling the character. So it's
Yeah.
almost like a second person narrative, and it's really, really immersive. So I think that's why I really loved it. And stuff like, you know, The Last of Us, which is getting a series now. And I was like fist pumping when I saw the first episode of The Last of Us, and I was watching it with my wife, and you know, the credits started and they used the same song from the game. You know, it's just like
Oh,
just
so wait, I didn't
little
know that's a
things.
game. That was a game first. Last of Us is a
The
game.
Last of Us was a game. It was an
Oh,
awesome game. It was like
okay.
it's probably a lot of people's like favorite storytelling game ever, because of it. I mean, the
Maybe
series
yeah,
is,
maybe my student did tell me about that one. But
yeah.
anyway, I should, I'm sorry. I'm probably
No,
some
it's
people
it's
watching are
it's
like, what? He doesn't know that? Yeah.
but I
Oh,
mean,
well.
it's super cool that, you know, you're getting to know it, that it's a game, because
Yeah.
um video games have very, very good stories, and just like
Yeah.
little details that are nostalgic, right? So when the credits started, they used the same song, the same intro song that you hear in the game. And I was just like looking at my wife, like, they're using the same song. And she was looking at me like, okay, it's because the way that we experience these kinds of stories, and just the actual experiences are just really deep, and I think they really stick with us. So
Yeah. Yeah.
so yeah, that was
That's really
a
cool.
big part of my journey. And then I eventually, got back into reading. I started reading Song of Ice and Fire when I got back. That was the first one. And then, just a short while later, the series came out as well.
Yeah. So do you see that as a big influence on your writing? A Song of Ice and
Yeah,
Fire? Yeah.
yeah, definitely. I consider myself a very analytical person.
Mm.
So one thing I did try to do was understand why people love Song of Ice and Fire so much,
Mm-hmm.
and not necessarily try to replicate it, but understand, the spirit of it, and maybe try to learn a little bit from that. And I
Yeah.
think it's that, they just I think one of the main things to me was that characters died, and Martin just doesn't care. He will kill the character because it's a little more realistic, right? It's more, if you were in a situation like this, you would die. So yeah, character's dead. There you go.
Does raise the stakes then, doesn't it?
Yeah, yeah, and you never know who's safe, which is awesome. So, so yes, I think, and just all the houses, the complexity, the political maneuvering, I think, is
Yeah.
probably one of the main influences that you'll see like shining through in A Touch of Light. Uh,
Yeah. I wonder if that's something too, because I think you're right that Martin does a lot of things really well, and his
yeah,
character development is fantastic. But it's something interesting that I sort of thought about recently is the houses and
yeah,
how they each have their motto and they each have their sort of personality. And it's
yeah,
not
yeah,
quite the same, but there's a little bit of like a more, I guess, younger version of that is like in Harry Potter. There are houses in Hogwarts. And
yes,
it seems like people like to identify with, oh, I would be house whatever, I would
yeah,
be a
yeah,
Ravenclaw, or
yeah.
I would be, House Stark, or whatever. It just seems like people like to identify with that way. That's a thing, right?
Yeah, yeah, and I think it's actually, intentional, because people look for those kinds of things to grab onto, because it's easier to identify with something that's maybe a label, I guess, and everyone can
Yeah.
identify with that same label, even if, Harry Potter has its criticisms of, oh, you're going to separate kids into four houses based on like one trait, and people aren't always one trait, blah, blah.
But people
But
love that stuff somehow.
yeah, yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Because you can say, "Oh, I'm the smart one. I'm Ravenclaw." It's like,
Yeah.
okay, you can be a ton of other things, but maybe the trait that you identify with the most is, being, smart and studious or whatever, and being a Ravenclaw, or being brave, which is, Gryffindor,
Yeah.
um, or nothing, which is Hufflepuff. I'm sorry, I just had to jab.
The truth is that probably most of
Yeah.
us on BookTube would be in Hufflepuff.
Yeah, I know. I just do that to poke fun at people who love Hufflepuff. But
Yeah.
um, so yeah, I mean, uh, I think having these kind of like easy to grab onto things in books really helps them gain popularity,
Yeah.
because it's what people remember a lot of the times.
Yeah. Yeah. And people like to identify with something like that, I think.
Yeah, yeah,
In order to, it's a little bit like having your zodiac sign and saying I'm a Leo, or I'm a whatever, Sagittarius, or
yeah,
whatever it
exactly,
is.
exactly.
I think people like to try out labels, on themselves in a way, if they're friendly labels, that is, and to
Yeah, yeah.
explore it themselves through those lenses, perhaps, I guess, maybe.
Yeah, yeah, I agree. I think, labels are probably just kind of shortcuts, I guess,
Yeah.
for maybe our psychology. I don't know if I'm getting too philosophical here, but
Yeah.
they can, I think if we use them to help understand ourselves and what we like, and
Hmm.
not be like a slave to your labels, then I think, it's a
Yeah.
pretty cool way of, having like the bullet points at the back of your mind of what I like or what I identify with,
Yeah.
and you obviously you change, but having these labels are, I guess, a part of
I think
everyone.
so. And hopefully they don't become a limitation where, oh, I'm a this, so therefore I'm not very good at that,
Yeah, yeah,
It'd be
yeah,
a shame for people to limit themselves that way. But it's
yeah,
interesting how attractive that seems to be in literature. So yeah, I think J.K. Rowling did do a lot of things that whether by design or accidentally, that just worked, I think, for a lot of people's psyches, like the idea of a little bit of a hero's journey kind of thing for Harry,
yeah, yeah, yeah,
combining a mystery with fantasy, and this whole house thing is like one of the most popular facets, I think, of the Harry Potter series. Even though we all recognize how silly it is,
yeah, yeah, yeah,
it just somehow people like to think about, oh,
yeah,
I would be a Gryffindor if I were at Hogwarts.
yeah, yeah, yeah. And I think, when I was a kid, like the only thing I wanted in my life was for Hogwarts to be real and
Oh
to
yeah,
live in Hogwarts for
you and millions of other kids.
yeah, yeah. So I guess there's a little bit of nostalgia as well, when you talk about it now,
Yeah,
because it was a big part for me, like
sure.
I
Yeah,
I like read up when a new Harry Potter book launched. I'd read it in like a day or something, I'd
yeah,
stay
yeah,
up all night reading. It was like awesome. So yeah.
yeah. Yeah, when my younger daughter was in her Harry Potter stage, one of the things she wanted to do was go to Universal Studios in Orlando,
Hmm.
Florida, where they have
Yeah,
all the Harry Potter stuff. And I'm not usually a theme park kind of guy,
yeah, yeah,
but we were kind of dragged there by my younger daughter. So
yeah,
I could feel the magic. I mean, people were there, and some of them were dressed up, and everyone's excited.
yeah,
By the way, not just kids, like adults, lots of, every age
yeah,
range.
yeah, yeah.
And
I
I kind of
remember.
had a good time sitting in the leaky cauldron, eating my lunch,
Yeah,
thinking,
yeah,
this is
yeah.
kind of cool. Yeah.
Yeah, and I remember when it opened up because Brazil, like Disneyland is like heaven for Brazilians. Like everyone,
Huh.
when you're a kid, like your dream is to go to Disneyland because
Huh.
you're going to another country and whatever. So it's actually pretty common for like everyone to have been to Disneyland in
Huh.
Brazil. And I
Huh.
think it's one of the reasons there's such a big Brazilian/Latin community in Orlando, because a lot of Brazilians actually live in Orlando.
Huh.
Um, so yeah, I mean, you go as a kid and it's pretty magical, and then you end up going a lot more when you're when you grow up. So yeah, I've been to Disneyland like a few times,
And you
and
have a kid now, so now you have an excuse to go back.
yeah, I have an excuse to go back. I mean, not that I needed one, but yeah, yeah. Yeah, my kid's gonna be 3 years old, so maybe in like a couple of years we'll be, going
Yeah.
to Disneyland again. um but it is just really cool, the things that they do. Like there was this Avatar ride. I don't know if you got it. It was one of the Disney park, the
I
Animal
haven't been to
Kingdom.
Disney. I only went to Universal.
Yeah, I
So,
mean,
yeah.
if you go on that ride as an adult, it is absolutely magical because it's like you're in the movie. It is like you are in the movie. You get
Wow.
onto this kind of like bike thing and put on 3D glasses, but it's so real. It's so
Huh.
real. It's like you're in the movie. So
Wow.
it is amazing. It is amazing.
I discovered that I don't do virtual reality rides very well because I think it has to do with the fact that I get migraines, but they
Ah,
make me
okay.
extremely nauseous. So I was
Yeah,
like,
yeah,
I did it for my kid, and then I realized
yeah,
I can't do these. I mean, they make me feel like, ugh.
yeah.
So yeah, it's sad, but maybe I'm just not cut out for being. I
Yeah,
could do the actual like physical rides though. So I
yeah.
did do like Hagrid's motorcycle ride, and
Hmm, hmm.
that sort of thing at Universal, that is.
Yeah,
Although
yeah.
I was terrified and I was screaming the whole time. But, yeah.
Like, and do you do good on roller coasters as
I
well, or
mean,
just
I wouldn't say that I do well on them. No. I mean, I
because
just like,
Busch
not.
Gardens is like amazing.
Yeah, I'm, yeah.
There's this like 90-degree drop roller coaster called Shikra in Busch
Yeah.
Gardens,
Oh
and it is
gosh.
just awesome because you go up and you see the drop on the other side as you're going up. So you're going up here, and if you look to the side, you see the 90-degree drop, and then it stops. You just you turn, and then it accelerates, but then it stops you like at the mouth of the drop, and just
And
looking
upon
down.
which some of your organs spill out of your mouth.
Yeah, exactly. And roller coasters usually at least have that kind of, it's psychological, but yeah, that safety net, which you can see the track, so you're not falling.
Right.
If you're on a 90-degree drop, you see
Oh,
nothing, so it's like you're just falling straight down. But it's super cool. It's super
you
cool.
won't be seeing me on that one probably.
Yeah, yeah. I'm sure my Brazilian roots here getting excited about theme parks, but yeah,
Yeah, oh, well, you never know what comes up around here. So that's awesome.
yeah,
We were
yeah.
still on your reading journey, though, I
Oh
think.
yeah, sorry. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. So
yeah.
after Song of Ice and Fire, then I started really branching out, and I found Scott Lynch, Gentlemen Bastards, and obviously, the big one, Mark Lawrence, who is my favorite author to this day. I
Oh,
really,
I
really
love
like
Mark
his
Lawrence.
books.
Is fantastic. He's among my favorites too. Yeah.
Yeah. Um,
Have you read all
and
of his books so far?
I still need to read the Prince of Fools trilogy, which I have started.
Oh, okay. I
Yeah,
love
yeah.
that one. Yeah. So
I
it's
kind of
Red Queen's War trilogy.
yeah, the Red Queen's War. I kind of just went from Broken Empire to Book of the Ancestor, and
Yeah.
then naturally, Book of the Ancestor leads into Book of the Ice,
Right.
which I finished The Girl in the Moon last year, which is the year that it came out, right? And
Yeah.
The Girl in the Moon is, to me, my favorite book of all time because of
Wow.
all of the connections that it makes with everything else, because not many people know this, but Mark Lawrence's universe is connected. It's
Yeah.
a lot more. It's subtle, but it is there. There's like this recurring character that appears
I
in
know who
every
you
one of his
mean.
books.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
I've seen that, which was interesting, because I
yeah,
just recently finished Book of the Ancestor.
yeah,
And I assumed, of course, that it was entirely different from the world of the Broken Empire and Red Queen's War. Broken Empire and Red
yeah,
Queen's War are the same, and
yeah, yeah,
there's crossover there. Like even the
yeah.
cameos from, Broken Empire characters who appear in Red Queen's War and that sort of thing. So that's obvious. And then there was this little, okay, in Book of the Ancestor, which made me think, oh, well, are
Yeah.
these in fact? Yeah, so that's cool. Yeah.
So yeah, Book of the Ice grabs that and just explodes it, into it finally like pulls back the curtain and it shows you everything, and it
Okay.
just becomes like super high stakes, and it's awesome. And
Now, what about
yeah.
the other trilogy, Impossible Times?
Oh, I haven't read Impossible Times yet. Right.
Okay.
Sorry. What I Mark's gonna say I'm being bad to his books, but yeah. When I think Mark Lawrence, I think about the fantasy books, not the sci-fi-ish, more Impossible Times books. But yeah, I still need to read
Yeah,
Impossible Times as
but I
well.
hear those are also tied in. So
Yeah, they are
yeah.
they are. Um, so yeah, I mean, it's great, but unfortunately when you start writing, like, it becomes harder and harder and harder to keep up your reading.
You're reading. I know. I know. It's almost like you have to choose.
Yeah,
It's really tough.
yeah.
But yeah.
So I do try to keep up my reading and get through what I can get through, but
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, there's still a lot to read on the TBR.
Interesting thing though about Mark Lawrence, if we could just go back to him for a second. So I don't know much about Impossible Times except that I've heard that it's more science fiction, but he
Yeah,
is somebody who just happily ignores that distinction between fantasy and science in any way,
yeah,
right?
yeah, yeah,
That's a
yeah,
hallmark, I think, of his writing, which is something that I enjoy actually.
yeah. And I think he does it in a way that's really natural and really organic.
Yeah.
um and it's just so cool because obviously I'm not going to get into spoilers, but you kind of realize what's like, the Broken Empire isn't just this second world fantasy. It has ties to
Yeah.
things that I
Yeah.
can't really
Yeah.
really say, but
But
and then
that makes it more science fiction-y, I guess, right?
yeah, it does. But it's like, imagine if you know in the far future, instead of getting more and more technological, we actually regressed and
I
kind
mean,
of
it's
fell
happened.
back in.
What
Yeah,
happened to the Romans? And then you get the Dark Ages after that. So
yeah, yeah,
it's happened.
yeah.
Yeah.
And I think that's genius. You know, um, just something that really grabs me in Mark's books is just like the way that he constructs ideas and the way that he decides to explore the ideas and uses theme and all of that as well.
Yeah.
And just, the concept of his ideas are just so cool that they instantly grab me and have me in the book. Like a Prince of Thorns, a lot of people say, oh, the protagonist is the villain, whatever. And it's
That's
actually
kind
a
of the
really,
point. Yeah.
yeah, because it's a really fascinating character exploration that he does.
Yes, it really is. Yeah.
And he said that it's inspired by Clockwork Orange.
Right.
Um,
Right.
so yeah, Jorg is very much inspired by Alex, and he's a
Yeah.
very, very angry person. And the first thing that hit me when I started reading that book was what has to happen to a person for them to be like this,
Yeah.
and
And
I
you
guess
kind of
that's not.
find out. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, and that's not every reader. Some readers just want to connect immediately with the character as if they were the character. And I think sometimes readers just say, I'd never do what Yori's doing, which is fine. Every reader has their way
Right.
of experiencing a book, but
Right.
it's just fascinating to me. And every time I read a Mark Lawrence book, it just kind of feels like home. So
Oh,
so
I
yeah,
feel the same way. He hits that sweet spot for me
yeah,
between provocative and interesting and entertaining.
yeah,
Interesting thing though is I think you're right. People do read Jorg and say, "Whoa, I'd never do that." But actually, if you had been through what he had gone through,
yeah,
you don't
yeah.
really know, do you?
Yeah, exactly. And that's actually something I was discussing with authors a while ago. It's like, a lot of people read books, and I see this a lot in reviews of saying, oh, the character had boneheaded decisions or whatever.
Hmm.
It's like, but put yourself in that situation. Would you do it any differently? Like
Yeah.
how would you be influenced if that happened to you? Because you're reading this, on the couch.
Yeah.
Like put yourself into this world. How would you react if you were in this situation? Would you have perfect decisions? Would you not see things? Because it's like, oh, plot hole. The character could have done this. It would have been easy. It's like, yeah, they could, but put yourself in their shoes. Like they might not have seen it, or they might have made a bad decision. And I think that's part of a cool story of making characters real, because if a character always makes the perfect decisions to so that you avoid, I don't know, plot hole criticisms or whatever, um it gets kind of like mechanical, I guess.
Exactly. Yeah, I agree. That's well said. Yeah. Yeah, no, I mean, people are flawed.
Yeah, yeah,
Newsflash.
yeah.
People are flawed and we do stupid things. I could name a few stupid things I've done in my time.
Yeah, yeah,
So it actually, when characters do stupid things, I think part of the frustration that we as readers can feel, maybe a little bit of projection going on there too. Who knows?
yeah, it could be.
Yeah, no, it makes sense, I think. And of course, without that stupidity, where is the character going to grow from,
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So yeah, but yeah, and I mean, then my reading journey went on to I really love Patrick Rothfuss and K. Jemison. Like
Cool.
the fifth season is just an absolute masterpiece
I agree.
for me.
I love all three books in
Yeah,
Broken Earth. It's just, to me, I know it's not the most popular opinion, but I found each book better and better. I love the third book where everything just sort of
cool.
like, oh, this is what she's been doing all this time. And it was like, for me, it was
So
like, wow, I got to the end of it. I
yeah,
was like, this is brilliant.
yeah, I mean, to me, the interesting thing is I love the first book. When I was reading the second book was right around the time when I was starting to write, so I
Ah,
kind of had to put it down, not a DNF obviously, but I kind of put it down at around 60%. And
hmm.
then I just was so into writing that I never came back to it, so I still need to finish that trilogy.
Oh, wow.
but
Okay.
yeah, but the fifth season itself to me is just a self-contained beautiful book. And
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
way that she creates everything there, and the way that she hooks you. I just did a blog tour for Shade of Madness, and one of the posts was a guest post on Before We Go blog, called The Books That Made Me. And the book that I picked to actually, talk about was the fifth season, because it showed me what could be done because of,
Yeah.
Jemison taking the risk of writing one of the POVs in second person,
Yeah.
and just taking all the risks that she takes in the book, and doing like it in a masterful way. it
Yeah.
it really inspired me, and it was right at the point where I was starting to write my own stuff. It really inspired me to say, okay, I'm not going to hold back. If I'm going to do something like the prologue to chapter 1 in A Touch of Light, which is something that a lot of people say, they're kind of like, oh, what happened here is
Yeah.
me like trying to put you into the skin of the character, because
Right.
yeah, they were confused as well when that happened, right? So
Right.
it's just trying to give you that feeling. And I know it's a risk, I know not everyone's going to like it, but I that's just kind of my Jemison influence, I guess, because I was like,
Mm.
okay, I'm going to try and do stuff like this as well, because if it feels right, then I'm going to try and do it. So yeah.
That's something I observed when I reviewed A Touch of Light, actually, was that the confusion is deliberate.
Yeah.
For quite a bit, actually, first maybe a couple hundred pages
Yeah.
or so. And when you look back on it, it makes sense.
Yeah.
Okay, this confusion is there for a reason, and it comes to fruition later in the book.
Yeah.
And when
Yeah.
the bigger mystery that's been going on begins to, you see pieces of it starting to fall into place. You think, oh, okay,
Yeah. Yeah.
that's why this was so confusing before, and now I think I understand where this is going. So yeah.
Yeah. And I think a big reason why people like A Shade of Madness a lot is because it starts giving you more of these answers.
Uh-huh.
It gives you a few more questions, but it doesn't throw you into the very deep end again. It's
Uh-huh.
like
Yeah.
not like Malazan,
Right.
which I am committed to reading this year. I have read Gardens of the Moon,
Oh, you've read
and I
Gardens of
want
the
to,
Moon. Okay,
yeah,
cool.
yeah, and I want to keep going.
Talk about
That's another book.
taking chances and risks. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And when I was taking these risks, I always had that voice at the back of my mind saying, we live in a world where Malazan exists and is popular, so
Yeah.
you'll find your crowd, I guess. So
I think even Steven Erickson has said he was surprised that anyone would publish it. And of
yeah,
course, there are lots of us who are glad that someone did. Yeah.
yeah. So yeah, I guess that's basically my reading journey. And then I jumped into a lot of indie books after self-publishing, because self-publishing was a choice, right?
Yeah.
I never actually wrote a letter to publishers, and I'm not saying that like
You never tried to
oh
find an agent or anything like that.
no, never. And I'm not saying that people who do are wrong, and I mean, agents
Yeah.
can help you in a lot of different ways, but after talking with a few editors, when I had the manuscript like close to ready, a lot of them said you should self-publish, because you're very like onto the series. You know what you want to do with the series. I
Yeah.
have a business degree, so there was that, like, I kind of
That's actually
was,
really handy for a
yeah,
writer these days.
yeah.
Yeah.
So I was very confident in being able to manage the business side as well. And but the one thing, two things which actually pushed me into self-publishing was, first of all, speed. So you can publish really, really fast.
Yep.
And the
I'm
second
finding
thing
out that
was,
myself. Yeah.
yeah, you're gonna
Nice.
publish one every
Every
three
3 months.
months, right? So
Yeah.
yeah, it's gonna be awesome. And the second thing was having control over your own career. So I had
Yeah.
seen a lot of trad pub authors. So yeah, they're like the really big ones that made it. But when you start as a trad pub author, you're
Yep.
in the mid list, right? What people call the mid list usually, which is, the publisher might push you with a bit of marketing, they might not. So it's more
Right.
like you have to kind of go it on your own, I guess, sometimes. But
Not sometimes. I think you have to, in that position, you are very much having to market yourself, I think.
yeah.
These
And
days.
the
Yeah.
problem with that is you're limited, because you don't get as much royalties as you get from self-pub,
Right.
and you don't have as much control of what you can do, what you can't do, rights and all that. So
Yep.
having control over my own career. I wanted to be responsible for my own success or my own failure. That's like what really pushed me into self-publish was like,
Yeah.
if I'm
Well,
gonna
and it's so
fail,
viable now. Never before, I think.
yeah,
Right.
yeah. And I mean, booktube it has really opened up to self-pub as well. I'm seeing more and more booktubers just
Yep.
really getting interested. And I think that's a result of just the quality of booktube and SPFBO, obviously, which is to me
SPFBO is
was
a
just
big
like
help.
the
Yeah.
yeah, it was a pioneer for
Yeah.
self-pub books, I think.
And I think we should
People really
mention,
trust it.
since you brought up SPFBO, the fact is that A Touch of Light is a finalist, right?
It's a
Yeah,
finalist this year, which is
that
mind-blowing.
is exciting. Yeah. So
Yeah.
when did now? I haven't looked into it in detail. When do they find? When do they do the final or whatever round? How does that work?
So in November, the finalists were announced, and then from November to end of April, I think the 10 blogs who are the judges read all of the 10 books, because the way
Okay.
that it works, for those who don't know how Spiffbeer works, it's there are 10 blogs. Each blog starts cutting down books, so they each get 30 books, and they start cutting down books until they pick one, and
So
then
you start
that
with
book is
300, you
yeah,
reduce it to 10.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah,
various stages. Okay.
yeah, and then when you get to those 10 finalists, they're announced in November, and then all the 10 blogs read all of the 10 books
All the 10 books. Yeah.
and give them scores, right?
And then there's the winner.
Yeah, there's the winner at the end of April. But the cool thing about SPFBO is that the real kind of like reward is the publicity, is the marketing of having your book on these blogs, which you might never have gotten a review on, or just getting it out there and people knowing you.
Yeah.
And being a finalist is already just this, I know it kind of sounds cliche, but it's just this huge win already,
Oh my goodness.
because
Yeah.
so many people know who you are now and know your book and are willing to give it a chance. So, what's really cool is that usually finalist groups, they are very close and very friendly to each other. And it's
Yeah.
almost like we're not even competing against each other, because,
Yeah.
we've all, had this kind of prize already, which is getting out there and getting known and
That does not
uh,
surprise me at all to hear you say that, because I've found the book community to be incredibly supportive
yeah,
and generous. And whether it's on BookTube and I'm getting to know more and more self-published authors myself,
yeah,
because I've been reading self-published books, and now that I'm going through my own self-publishing journey, several self-published authors have reached out to me and said, "Hey, would you like some help? Here's
yeah,
something."
yeah,
And I've gotten such great advice from some of them. It's been really tremendous, and you get a sense that these people are not competing against each other. They're actually supporting each other. It's almost like they understand that we're all in this self-publishing world, and
yeah,
one person's success lifts up everyone else.
exactly,
I think that's
exactly.
the perception there. That's the realization, and
Yeah.
it's wonderful. It's really cool.
Yeah, it is, because once you have like that one self-published book that people say, oh, okay, this is a good, because the way that self-publishing was born and whatever, there was the stigma that self-publish isn't as good as trad because it doesn't go through
Right?
as much editing or whatever.
Right.
The covers aren't as good, but that's all been debunked, I think.
Oh, I think the covers are largely better.
Yeah,
Largely better.
yeah.
Now, I don't know how the AI thing is going to change all this, because
Oh
I
yeah,
know it's expensive to pay an artist to make a cover.
yeah,
So I think a lot of people who are self-publishing are going to be understandably tempted to have an AI cover. But for now, what I think is, by and large, self-published covers tend to be better than the traditional ones. And traditional publishers are probably going to be tempted to use AI as well. So maybe that doesn't really have much of an effect there.
yeah.
If the net effect is everybody does it, which I hope doesn't happen, because
Yeah. I honestly don't think it's gonna go that way.
yeah,
I think it was this shiny new toy. It's still here. It's not going away, but
right.
I think response to AI covers has not been positive, especially if you're seeing it from a big publisher who has the money to actually pay an
Pay an
artist to
artist.
do it.
Yeah.
So I mean, and I've seen a lot of self-pub authors like vow, you will never see an AI cover on my books. And I mean, uh, I don't even have to vow that, I think, because my artist is so amazing that I would never,
Yeah.
change him for
That's a beautiful cover. Yeah.
yeah. I
Yeah.
mean, you crazy. And then I talked to I became friends with another very good artist, Sparrow Springs, which did the internal illustration for Shade of Madness, because every hardback has this incredible griffin illustration with a certain sentinel before it battling,
Wow.
this horde. I don't know if you've seen it going around on Twitter, but it's on my Instagram as
I
well.
have liked a few of those tweets myself. Yeah.
Yeah. It's an amazing image, and I can't wait to get the physical version in my hand so I can see it for myself.
Yeah.
But I could never have done that with AI. So I think it's just a question of, yeah, sure, it exists, but is it as good as human artists? And to me, it's not. So
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I wanted to go for myself for my own covers. I'm going for a slightly, I think, distinctive look.
mhm,
Wanted the cover to convey the vibe that I'm going for in the story, which in my
yeah.
case is old. It's
Uh-huh.
not exactly just medieval, but it's more like medieval. And
Yeah,
so
yeah.
the AI would be the last thing for me in that case, because I feel like they're very glossy, very slick. The ones I've seen anyway. I have not looked into it very much, but
Mhm.
I'm sure they'll be able to program AI to do various styles, I suppose. But
Yeah, I think so. And I mean, if it's something that gets regulated and that people get comfortable with, great.
yeah,
The more tools that people are comfortable with and that are fair, the better. Uh,
yeah, yeah,
so that's, okay if that gets sorted out. But while we're discussing like the ethics of it, yeah, I'm just staying
yeah.
away. So yeah.
I am too, and I didn't even think about it for a millisecond, because there's an artist that I know and want to support, and I hope that it'll be helpful for that person's career, and so I never really even thought about it, but you're right, it is kind of the shiny new toy,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
people are experimenting with it, I guess. So we'll see where it goes, and there is, of course, the whole other, we talking about art, but then there's the whole AI can write apparently as well, although I'm not convinced it writes very well yet. So
Yeah, I don't think it does. And
yeah,
again, I think writing is probably harder to emulate, because how are you going to get like AI to write a Cosmere or something? How are you going to get AI to write something that's interconnected? And I mean, I could just be completely wrong, and someone might just say, something in the comments of you're wrong. It can easily do that. Fine, whatever.
yeah,
But uh there's so much in writing um that's human to me, uh that I think that's hard for an AI to replicate. I just think it is. It's hard to explain. It's
yeah,
just
yeah. No, I think so too. There's
yeah.
something lacking there. So one booktuber friend of mine, David Desero, was making a video about AI, and he read aloud in one video an essay written by uh, chatbot or whatever it's called, and
Yeah, yeah.
he it was an essay about ranking the top 10 fantasy or something like that, and it was,
Mhm.
first of all, the ranking I thought was totally inaccurate. But I don't think any human would have come up with that ranking, but who
Yeah,
knows? But yeah, it named a bunch of well-known fantasy books
yeah,
and talked about facets of them in a way that was coherent. So I
yeah,
thought,
yeah.
okay, that's interesting. But then he also did another one where an AI wrote a skit, a comedy skit, and it was
Mhm.
just awful. It was not
Yeah,
funny at all. So I thought, okay, the comedians are safe
yeah.
anyway.
The
Yeah,
comedians are safe.
yeah,
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, I think it's about connection, right? Because one of the most common things that you see people talking about when they after they've read a book, when they're reading it, or whatever, is I connected to this character or I didn't connect to this character. So
Yeah,
I think it's really hard for an AI to emulate that.
I think so. I think so. We'll see where it goes, but
Yeah, yeah.
right now I think that's accurate. But yeah. But in terms of your own influences, we talked about some of the books that have been important for you, and you can feel free to bring up any others that you think of. But I'm also curious about in your writing about place, because in my writing, I can name places that I've lived and been that I feel are present in my books. And I wonder if the same is true for you. Where there are places you traveled to or lived in that you feel like this is my nod to X or something like
Uh,
that.
there are a couple, yeah, mostly in my mind, but in the world that, I mean, a lot of video games influence me, the worlds that we live in video games. But like in our world, like the real living, breathing world, I remember, for example, Sakantha, which is a city that is actually joined by a bridge, right? It's
Yeah.
got this too, and you're gonna see a lot more of it in A Shade of Madness. It's
Okay.
this, it's like this big city on two hills, and it's joined by this really tall bridge.
Wow.
And I got inspired by Ronda, which is a city in Spain,
Cool.
which is actually, it's close to Seville, which is where, yeah, Ferdinand, the animation, the bull,
Uh-huh.
uh at the beginning, like the place that he looks at, that he likes his view, you can see the bridge in the background. It's actually Ronda. So
Oh, wow.
uh yeah, that's an incredible little
So that's a
city.
real world inspiration for you. Yeah.
Yeah, 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 and it's the flower festival that he goes to is in that city, because it's
Okay.
on the bridge and all that. So yeah, and it's just this small little kind of almost like town, which with a huge bridge. But it's so cool, a lot of stuff is like built into the mountain, and it's just this really kind of like quaint town, I guess, and that inspired me. But I made it into like this huge city with this massive bridge, like joining
Well,
the
because
two
it's
sides.
fantasy, you got to go
Yeah,
big, right? Yeah.
yeah, exactly. So I can, that's like the first one that I really remember. But just traveling to Europe, I've been to like just Portugal, Spain, France, whatever. Every time I try to England as well, like just being to places like Stonehenge or Bath, or
Yeah. Yeah.
they kind of inspire your subconscious, I guess. They
Yeah.
stay
Where
there
you
in,
can
in
feel
your
the
database.
past in
Yeah,
those places, right? Yeah.
yeah. And I always try. In Portugal, we kind of went to a lot of historical cities, and saw the castles, and all that. So that always is inspiring, because you kind of keep that knowledge at the back of your mind. I wouldn't say I specifically pull up, oh, this city or this place, but I think it kind of builds the images for you to pull on later.
Yeah, oh, absolutely. I think traveling is one of the best things you can do if you can't afford it, for your
Yeah.
writing, because it exposes you to different inspirations and visions and that sort of thing. Sometimes places closer to home too, though. I mean, I don't know if has Brazil found its way in your writing at all, or in any way, shape, or
Yes.
form? Yeah.
Not necessarily in places, but I think a lot of South American culture inspired the clans. So
Okay.
for example, the arenas that they fight in, which are kind of like sunk into the ground,
Yeah.
that I was inspired by Machu Picchu for that. Um,
Oh, okay.
yeah,
Cool.
yeah.
Ah,
So and if you look at photos of Machu Picchu, there's like this stair like carvings, that
yeah.
are directly into the peak, right? And then there's like this open, it's grassy right now, but it's almost like an arena. So
That makes
I got,
sense. That makes
yeah,
sense. Yeah, I can picture that. Yeah.
yeah. So I got very inspired by that. And just like Brazilian culture, the way that we're set up, there's this big cultural divide. We have a big gap socially here.
Uh-huh.
And one of the most famous kind of things in Brazil are the favelas, which are the shanty houses. And I'm sorry if my
Oh, it's
my baby
fine.
girl is
We
in the back here. So
we love
yeah.
children here in Dear Doggy Fantasy, so not a problem.
um. So
But
yeah.
that's really interesting because as I was reading, I was wondering about this is we're talking about Nasha's storyline
Yes.
here.
Yes. 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 Yes.
And I was kind of wondering about that. So yeah, this is really cool to hear you discuss that. So there is where in without any spoilers in Nasha's storyline, there is a very clear cast kind of at
Yeah.
play.
Yes. Yes.
Where you have a certain group of people who are looked down on by another group of people based on their
Exactly. Exactly.
location and
Yeah.
background and such
Yeah.
and so forth. Yeah.
And they're the people who live on the slopes. And funnily enough, if you look at a picture of Rio de Janeiro, which is not the city I live in, but it's in Brazil,
Yeah.
you can see that a lot of the shanty towns, the favelas, are on the slopes. So it's kind of like that
Yeah.
dynamic, which obviously I'm not trying to emulate the real world because
Right.
people people get easily offended by that, but I was inspired
Yeah.
by the social structures that we have in Brazil
Yeah.
and the way that things work here. Yeah.
It is interesting because historically too, you can tell a lot about a person's social background from the location. I mean, it's
Yeah.
sort of classic. You see it all over history where one group displaces another, and the displaced group, which is looked down on or seen as lesser, has to live in the less fertile, the harder to live in territory. And so often that is higher elevation. So they're actually looking down on the people in the valley.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So it's interesting. And of course, there are some cultures where living higher up means something too. It's a status symbol. It's a safer area from assault, that sort of thing, where you'd have a fortress at the top of a hill or something like that. But but geography, and that's something we see in fantasy all the time. The idea that where you live, tells a lot about your social status. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, what starts to happen is, the people who are kind of ostracized start to create their own social structures, right?
Yeah.
So there's a lot of well, I mean, this happens in Brazil, like the gangs and the gang leaders all live in these places, right? But they're not all gang and gang leaders, and that's what causes the prejudice in our social system, is that if you come from that place, you're automatically like going to, I don't know, you're a thief or whatever, and people start looking down on you and not trusting you simply because of the way you look or where you were born, and that's not the case. So I wanted to use that a lot.
That's a theme you're
story.
obviously tackling head on in A Touch of Light. And is it something you continue to deal with in A Shade of Madness?
Yeah, I mean, it is, but you'll see that in The Shade of Madness, it gets the characters travel a bit more.
They probably broaden.
Yeah. So there still is that very personal thing in Nasha of the way that others see her and she sees herself, and she doesn't want to let others see her, just for the way that they can use her. So she hates being called a tool, for example.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I'm not even sure she knows who she is. Right. So I'm not even sure. I mean, I am sure what's happening because I built a character, but I was kind of like in character mode right now. So she's not even sure how she is, like what she is, because of her condition, right? Not only because of the place she came from, but because she can't remember a lot about her past and this curse that she thinks she has, right? So
that's how she thinks of it. Yeah. Cool. Yeah, I'm probably not the only person who's said that Lynn is a favorite character. I suspect that she's very popular.
She is.
That is was my favorite of the storylines. I like them all, but Lynn's I just found extra somehow. Really compelling, and the conflict that you managed to all the characters have conflict in them, first of all, which is excellent. That's something you want to have in your characters, is conflict. but Lynn's is just so there and compelling and fascinating to
Yeah.
me. So I don't know if you know where she came from. She just sprang to life in your mind, or what? But she's a great character.
So Lynn's a funny one because the version of Lynn that we have in the book is definitely not the first version that I came up with, right?
Okay. Yeah.
So the foundation of Lynn was just being kind of like a rogue paladin, right? A
Okay.
paladin who
Right.
ran away from the order. Uh, but I wanted to use her to explore the themes of faith versus religion. And
Uh-huh.
that's like the main thing for her, because faith and religion are not the same thing. And I'm
Right.
very, very careful to explore themes and not insert opinions into the themes that I'm exploring. So I'm very cautious of never giving an author opinion of religion is good or religion is bad. I try to do it through the character's lens. So Lynn is very much someone who wants to believe in the religion and very much someone who has faith, but both of those things are challenged as she goes through stuff, right? And
Yeah.
I have heard the question time and again, like, oh, if God is so good, why does he let children die, or why does he let natural disasters happen? And I'm not
Why is there
claiming
so
to
much
have,
pain and suffering in the world?
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. And I don't claim to have the answer for that, but maybe I could have a character who explored that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
So that's kind of like the path that she goes down. And I think that's why she's pretty relatable, because,
Mm.
she wants to be faithful. She wants to do the right thing, but she's just been forced to go through, hell basically, and
Yeah. Yeah.
kind of rip out her own heart, because what happened to her was with people who are so close to her. So,
Right.
um, you know, that's kind of what she became. But a lot of like,
Yeah.
I was playing a lot of, not a lot, but I was kind of like getting into Hellblade: Senua's Sacrifice, which is a game that deals a lot with mental issues.
Mm-hmm.
And the
Yeah.
main character has these voices in her head, and I just remember playing the intro. She's just paddling down this wide open kind of like river or stream, because it's Norse inspired. She's paddling into the Viking hell
Okay.
to, I think, save a loved one. So it's almost like Norse Dante's Inferno, I guess.
Huh. Huh.
uh um and I was doing it with headphones, and the voices were like in my head, and it's so cool because it's like it's not one voice, it's like all these voices, like, and the directional thing from the headphones, so it's like they're coming from all around. And that
Wow.
immediately inspired me to, okay, I know what I'm going to do with this character now, because that's just going to be an extra level of hardship and conflict for her, and that's
Yeah.
how
Yeah.
it's going to manifest. Because for people
That's
who
the
don't
that's the
know,
PTSD manifesting itself.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, exactly. And
Yeah.
for people who don't know, the religion in the Touch of Light is against death. So
Right.
people have actually found a way to extend their lives, which they say is through the blessings of their goddess, which is a seraph. And you can't talk about death. You can't really think about the dead. You're not supposed to remember them in any way, because they're now considered unworthy. Because if your goddess is life itself, then if people died, then they have been discarded. They are now unworthy.
Right.
And
Right. Huh.
they do that because the goddess has left because of all the death and killing. And now the people need to show her that, they're good enough for her to come back. So that's why they're like, we can't talk about death, because if we talk about death, she's never going to come back. But like every rule, there is an exception. So the church actually can keep people, they keep their bodies preserved, so
Right.
that when the seraph does return, these are the people considered worthy, even if they have died, because of all
Yeah.
the things that they did in life. So the seraph is actually going to revive these people when she comes back, or that is like
That's the theory.
it's,
Yeah.
yeah, that's the
Or that's the
theory.
religion, not the
Yeah,
religion. It's
yeah,
interesting. Do you think, I wonder what you think of this. So one of the distinctions, and I agree with you that faith and religion are not the same, right? There's a
yeah,
lot of overlap,
yeah,
obviously,
yeah, yeah,
but they're not the same. And maybe one distinction is perhaps that faith is a personal matter, whereas religion is institutional. We think of it
Yeah,
as an institution.
yeah,
And sometimes, in that way at least, our faith doesn't always mesh with our religion. Does that make
exactly.
sense?
Yes, yes. And this is something that I have struggled with in the past. Every time, I mean, I have always been interested in different religions, and tried to learn about them. But every time I got deeper and deeper and deeper, I would find a level of it's zealotry is a strong word, and it's not that, but
Right.
um I'd find a level of, almost like blind faith to the religion,
Yeah.
and not to, faith itself. So it's hard to be very engrossed in the religion to me, because what if I don't agree with this thing? Then am I forced to agree with it because the religion is telling me to? Or,
Right. Right.
what should I do? And I don't have an answer for that.
Yeah, and some
So
people who are very invested in the religion, not all, but some might say, well, your faith isn't strong enough because
yeah,
you don't
yeah,
believe what you're supposed to believe, right?
yeah,
I
yeah,
think others, though, would say, well, it's good that you have doubts because a religion that you believe in without question may not be as strong as you think. And so
exactly.
having doubts and going through doubt is a process of exploration that can actually could end up making your faith stronger. Maybe isn't the right word, but it could make your faith broader. It
Exactly.
could enhance your faith in a way that makes you understand other faiths, other religions, and your own differently. So,
Yeah, yeah. And I mean, that is what fascinates me. And that is exactly, a
yeah.
big point that I wanted to explore in this book, because
Hmm.
Lin is an elite warrior of the church. They are
Right.
the only people in the world who are allowed to kill, exactly because they are considered to be the people with the strongest faith. So death is not going to affect them. So when you have someone that you see is struggling with PTSD or whatever that is actually based on death,
Yeah.
it's kind of of like non-intuitive, I guess. But that to me was fascinating, because what if you get someone who's supposed to be like the main kind of like religious, always there, always believing, always
Right.
faithful,
Right.
and is actually struggling with their faith and with the religion, but they can't show it because they're part of the elite. So what happens then, right?
Paladin. Right.
Yeah, yeah,
A paladin
yeah,
having a crisis of faith. Yeah.
yeah. That's how she was born. So yeah, it's kind of like a long-winded answer, but she was born very, very slowly, and very, piece by piece,
Yeah.
because I think I had to slowly put all those pieces together for it to make sense.
Yeah. Cool. And of course, your other character, your other main POV in A Touch of Light, Adrian, is also torn between faith or let's say the official religion, which you just explained about the aversion to death, and something very personal, which I'm not going to say because that would be a spoiler, but
Yeah,
something
yeah,
very personal that makes him have to re-examine his whole this whole religion, this institution that
yeah, yeah,
maybe he feels that there's something wrong with it based on his
yeah,
personal experience. So
yeah. And Adrian is a character that's very, I really like the space that I'm exploring with him, because
yeah,
he's nobility, he's had his life extended, but he's very much a non-believer in the faith. He doesn't think his life has been extended because of the seraph. He
right,
thinks it's something else. um but this something else, which would be, like the power in his family's blood, is actually thrown against him because he doesn't have a good relationship with his father and his
right,
family.
right.
So that's what he struggles with a whole lot as well. And this is a completely kind of different space that I'm exploring here, because I wanted stuff to be unique and different, right? I didn't want all of the characters necessarily to be exploring faith, even if they each explore their own faith in their way. And I even
Yeah,
talked about this in the stream a couple of days ago. A lot of people say, "Oh, the characters aren't connected." I mean, to me, they are, because they're connected through theme, and they're
Yeah.
connected, through everything that they're explored, even if they don't meet physically. So if you actually look really closely and maybe reread it, you'll see that Adrian is actually a mirror of Nasha, of all people, and they are actually struggling with their own faiths in
Yeah.
different cultures and in different ways, but they're struggling with very, very similar issues of kind of finding their place, knowing who they are, being accepted versus not being accepted,
Yeah.
and how do they do this? And they go through completely opposite paths. So that's the kind of connection that I created in the characters, and obviously they're eventually going to start, coming
Oh, you
together.
can see
But
them.
yeah,
Their journeys are probably going to. There are going to be some meetings, I would
yeah,
imagine.
yeah. So yeah, Adrian is this other kind of a lot more personal. Um, I want to be accepted. Kind of exploration, I guess.
Yeah.
It's more like, um, what defines his value? Is it his father? Is it because what what defined his value is the thing that he lost, right? Which I'm not gonna say. But was it right for him to put all his value into that kind of thing or that kind of relationship, or should he find, his own strength elsewhere? So that's the exploration of Adrian. That's his theme. It's
Yeah.
what defines your value as a person and where you should put it, and you know who should you use to help you with that, or
Yeah.
should it come from yourself? And if it comes from yourself, what are the risks? Are you starting to become arrogant? Are you starting to not listen to
Mm,
people, because almost like a defense mechanism? Because when you open yourself to people, you kind of suffer. So what if you do things by yourself on your own way, and that leads
right.
to stuff like boneheaded decisions sometimes? So
Yes,
yeah,
indeed. Yeah.
yeah,
Well, I
yeah,
mean, there's the question of where meaning comes from too. Is it the personal, or is it the social, or is it some interaction between those elements,
yeah, yeah,
which sometimes can be very much at loggerheads, the personal and
yeah,
the social, so we see that
yeah,
with the
exactly.
characters. That's a lot of it's a big part of, I think, Adrian, particularly his struggle. So yeah, particularly in the role that he's been put in too, because he's expected to play a certain
Yeah,
role.
yeah, yeah,
And that, so his wiggle room is pretty narrow, right, in that role.
yeah,
So
yeah. And I mean, there is also something that I really like to play with, because I'm a mean person and I'm evil to my characters, which is the effects that the religion and especially titles have on people. I
yeah.
really like to play with the effects that titles have on people, because I see that a lot in the corporate world. It's like the moment
Oh,
you call someone like a manager or a director or something, not everyone, but a lot of people, it's like, oh, now I'm good. Now I have found my identity. Now I am a
yeah.
manager, and that means I am better than people who are not managers or whatever. So I like to
Interesting.
play
I
with
even
that a
see
lot.
it as an academic. It's funny because I've been serving as the interim chairperson at my college in my department,
Yeah,
and nothing terrible, but it was interesting to see how my colleagues suddenly treated me differently because I had a title, chairperson, as opposed to
exactly.
just professor, and it was like, oh, and you see a
Yeah,
different. I mean, you're treated differently. People are different around you, and you see different
yeah,
sides to them that you hadn't seen before when we were just colleagues.
yeah, yeah,
Now you're acting like this, so this is interesting.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
And imagine having that for years and years and years, and having maybe hundreds of people who look up to you, and
right.
in a hierarchy sense, right? Not in looking up to you, but actually looking up, and
Yeah,
you start to maybe, if
and
you
that's
don't
all you
really have.
really know in his situation.
Yeah,
Right? Yeah,
yeah. And so when he gets a title, he I'm not going to go into spoilers, but
right.
eventually it can maybe rub off on you, and you might start to think that because you have a title, you're entitled to do something. So
Yes, indeed,
uh
indeed. Yeah,
yeah. And that, as I said, it's a mirror. It happens in Nasha as well.
yeah, yeah,
um
yeah. It does. Yeah,
yeah,
cool. Well, those are the three POVs, and there's plenty more, but we don't want to wander into spoilers.
Yeah,
Anyone
yeah,
who
yeah,
hasn't read A Touch of Light, but you just from what we were saying, I think you can hear how you're a theme first kind of author. So
yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
And by the way, though, guys, there's a ton of action. A
Oh yeah,
ton of action. So don't get the idea that because Thiago is a theme first author, oh, that sounds, a little too highfalutin for me. There's action, action, action in here. So don't worry about that. That's there too.
yeah.
Uh, so I always forget that because I love talking about themes myself. And I'm afraid that sometimes I make books sound boring to people because I'm always talking about these themes. And then
Yeah.
like, oh,
Nah, I
does
mean,
anything happen there? So
yeah,
lots happens. So yeah, lots of things happen there.
yeah. So too much maybe. I mean, it's a lot. It's a lot. Like I consciously know that the ball always keeps rolling, and once you've made sense of something, another stone is starting to roll down the hill, and
Yeah.
you gotta run. So
Oh, I
and
think so. I mean, I think we expect that. Even if a book starts slow, like I'm reading Robin Hobb right now, and
yeah,
I love Robin Hobb, the top 3 author for me, and she's just
yeah,
brilliant. But every book of hers, I think it's fair to say, starts with this slow kind of immersion,
mhm,
and then it's later in the book that things get exciting, and that's a fairly typical pattern in fantasy. I think it's fair to say
yeah, yeah,
we come
yeah,
to
I
expect
think
it
so.
without
We
really
have.
thinking about it, right?
Yeah, yeah, and I mean that slow build is important to invest you in the characters, right, and the story.
Yeah.
um but you eventually do need some action. I mean, I'm very much driven by action, and I love just having fight scenes and battles and all that in my book.
Yeah.
And I never expected it to be something that people actually, talked about in reviews, but I was so happy that people actually think I write them well, because
Yeah.
I guess it's something that I've always liked. So I really do love my battles. My All my books have big battles, and it's not like that one big battle at the end of the book. It's like I like my action, but action has to mean something.
Right.
Otherwise it's just mindless whatever. So
Yeah.
yeah, like mindless button mashing, if you think about video games. So it has
Yeah.
to mean something. So it's important to me that action always has an objective.
Right. Right.
Like
Which is
why?
why it's good that you're bringing these themes in and doing some character
Yeah,
development. Otherwise, the action we don't care really that much.
yeah, yeah, exactly. And I mean, even on it doesn't have to go as deep as theme. Just you have that place that you need to get to, and you need to fight through this group of people to get to that place, because it's a
Yep.
strategic place for the battle or whatever. Otherwise, why are you even fighting these people, right? So that's small, just kind of I learned that a lot from watching Brandon Sanderson's
Oh yeah.
his online
Yes.
course at BYU.
Yeah.
He talks a lot about that. Even if you're just in the room, have an objective of the person needs to get to the other side of the room. And I immediately saw that in Mistborn. I think it's one of the first kind of like battles, not
Uh-huh.
battles, just fight scenes.
Yeah.
um yeah, there's always an objective. It's always like and the character thinking, I need to do this, I need to get there. They're not just fighting to fight, right? They need the objective. So I think
Good
that's
advice.
really important. Yeah.
Yeah. Good advice. Wow. Wow. Well, this is exciting. I'm so glad to get this opportunity to chat with you about your writing. I think we writers are weird in that we really love hearing other people's experiences and the thought processes. And
Yeah.
it's just something that makes me happy to hear about. So it's
Yeah.
been a lot of fun hearing this. And I am
Awesome.
so interested in reading A Shade of Madness. You have a great start in A Touch of Light, and of course, I wish you the very best with this series. How many books are going to be in the series?
Four. I'm
4.
currently kind of revising the outline for A Twist of Faith, which is
Okay,
book 3,
cool.
and which is coming out this year. and I'm going to try to still launch A Promise of Dawn, which is book 4 this year as well,
Okay.
by the end of this year.
So
I mean,
5, including the
oh yeah,
prequel
5 including the
novella.
prequel
Yeah.
novella. Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
And my idea was to get the whole series done in 24 months. So
Wow.
I launched A Touch of Light March 1st last year. It's been
Okay.
less than 12 months. I have the novella and book 2 out, so I have 2 books to go. So yeah, I mean, before March 1st next year, you should have all 4 books out.
You're going to make your readers happy that way. Yeah.
Yeah, I hope so. I hope so.
Nice. Nice. And what's next? Have you thought that far ahead? Are you going to stay in this world, or are you going to try something entirely new? Have you thought that far ahead yet?
I might have a couple of secret projects in this world. I don't know when or if I'm going to manage to do that.
Okay.
So, maybe it's tomorrow and I'll just surprise everyone with
Wait, are you
something.
going to pull a
Maybe,
Sanderson on us?
maybe, I don't know. So, I mean,
Okay.
I love this world too much to never come back to it.
Yeah.
But I do have such a cool idea for another series that I want to start after this.
Okay.
And
Okay.
it's pulling at me like right now, and I need to keep pushing it away so that I can finish what I'm doing.
Yes.
But
But
there's
then
like
you'll have to
so
heed the
much.
call. Yeah.
Yeah, and there's like already so much in my head, and I already have so many cool like characters, ideas, and plot twists, and all that. And I think I already know exactly like how I'm going to structure book 1 of this, and it's going to
Wow.
be so cool. It's
That's
going
a
to be so
really
cool.
good problem to have for a
Yeah,
writer, right? It's
yeah,
like, oh, I have
yeah.
too many things I want to write right now. So yeah,
Yeah.
that's
And
good.
this one specifically is something that I'm going to have to jump into, um, you know, as soon as I finish the series, because it's the call is too strong to deny, I think.
Ah, good, good, good. Your story is calling you. That's a good thing. Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow. Well, thank you so much, Thiago. I've enjoyed this tremendously. And like I said, it's just wonderful to get to talk to the people who write the books. And
Yeah.
I personally feel like it enriches the experience. And I hope that my viewers agree that it is really enriching to hear you talk. And we managed to avoid spoilers. So maybe you're going to have a few more readers as well,
Yeah. I
checking
hope so.
out A Touch of Light. And yeah, I would certainly encourage that. And it's I hope my viewers have also enjoyed hearing about your writing process as I have. So thank you very much for being here today.
Thank you for having me. It's super fun. I always tell people when I started out, last year, I was writing and I've always watched a lot of booktube, and I'd watch, like Dear Dr. Fantasy and whatever, and say, oh man, I wish I could be there one day, and so
Yeah.
it's always kind of mind blowing to me to have people know who I am and invite me on, and just, or sometimes I invite myself because I just want
Good.
to
Good.
if
Yeah.
you want to have me on, I'm happy to. So
Yeah.
I just really love having these chats, and super cool chatting to you about this, and super happy to have been able to do this. So thanks for having me as well. And
Awesome. All right.
I always tell readers to shout at me while they're reading my book. Just feel free to, even if your favorite character dies, it's cool. It's cool to know that you're invested. So if you ever want to talk about anything, I'm always available.
Yeah. Awesome. Yes, you're on Twitter, of course. And where else? Where's a good place for people to find you?
I'm on Twitter. I am trying to be more active on Instagram as well. So I do answer DMs usually, both on Twitter and on Instagram. My DMs are always like open to people who want to try and chat with me. And I'm a lot on Discord as well, like a ton of servers. If any of you like are on Alan's channel, the Library
Yep.
of Alexandria, which I do need to give a shout out to Alan, because he's going to be so angry at me if I don't mention him. No, I mean, Alan was the first guy who jumped onto a touch of light, and
Yeah.
he did the first review. And I think the only reason anyone even knew about a touch of light when it came out was because Alan recorded a review at midnight to post it on launch day.
Wow.
So
Wow.
yeah, yeah, Alan has been the best, and I really wanted to have his blurb on book 2 to like show that, you know, he's a big part of his journey,
I
of this
saw that.
journey.
The Library of
Yeah,
Alexandria blurb is on
yeah,
front
yeah,
cover. Nice. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. So big shout out to Alan, who's been, you know, a very, very staunch supporter, even if he declares holy wars on me all the time. But you know, that's
Well,
Alan.
Alan has his holy wars.
Yeah, yeah,
They tend to be intense but brief. So.
yeah, yeah.
So, but yeah, he is a wonderful member of our community here, and
Yeah.
I'm thrilled he's going to be doing the audiobooks
Oh yeah,
for
yeah,
my
exactly.
trilogy. So
Yeah,
I think he was born for that role. I think he's going to be a brilliant audiobook narrator. And I'm going to be able to say that I was the first to have
yeah,
Al narrate my books. So
yeah,
that's going to
yeah.
be my claim to fame, probably. So,
Yeah, yeah. And he's going to do a spectacular job because you see
oh
him
yeah,
just like messing around with voices and he
yeah,
does them so well. Yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah. He's got all those voices. Yeah. So, all right, Thiago, thank you so much, and everybody, thank you for watching. And
Thank you.
until next time.
Till next